Colton's point of view.
The moment I heard her sharp intake of breath, my instincts screamed. My hands tightened on the wheel, knuckles whitening, and I shot a glance at her. Ava's face was pale, her eyes squeezed shut, one hand clamped over her belly. The other gripped the edge of the seat, nails digging into the leather. "Shit," I muttered under my breath. "Ava." Her name slipped out like a gunshot. She flinched again and my chest contracted painfully. I could feel the panic rising, the kind that clawed at my chest until all logic left me. "Talk to me," I ordered, my voice low but sharp, cutting through the road noise. "Tell me what's happening." She shook her head, teeth gritted, her body trembling under the sudden intense pain. My instincts kicked in before I even thought. I jerked the wheel, cutting into the other lane, heading straight for the hospital. "Hold on, Ava," I gritted out, voice low but sharp. "We're going straight to the hospital, just hold on." Her hand clenched over her belly, her knuckles white. I reached for her hand instinctively, gripping it tightly, grounding her. She flinched against the sharp cramp again, but didn't speak. I didn't need words. I just drove, weaving through the evening traffic with precision and barely contained fury. By the time we skidded into the hospital parking lot, she was sweating, her face pale, hair sticking to her forehead. I barely had time to jump out before a team of doctors and nurses was at the car, stretching out a stretcher and moving with a speed that made my chest tighten even further. "Sir, step aside," a nurse barked. I moved back, my heart hammering as they carefully lifted her onto the stretcher. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow but steady. I watched, helpless, as they wheeled her through the sliding doors. A doctor called over his shoulder. "VIP wing, private room, you'll have to wait here, Mr. Sinclair." I paced the waiting area like a caged animal, dragging my hands through my hair repeatedly. Every second felt like an hour. The cold, polished floors reflected my sharp movements, the emptiness around me amplifying every growl of frustration in my chest. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the same team of doctors wheeled her back out, but she was still unconscious. Her face was serene, no longer twisted in pain. My stomach unclenched slightly at the sight, though my worry hadn't left. I rushed up beside them. "What's wrong with her? Is she okay? Is the baby okay?" My voice was taut, barely holding back panic. The lead doctor, a tall man with a calm demeanor, met my gaze. "Both mother and baby are fine, Mr. Sinclair. She experienced a sudden, intense Braxton Hicks contraction, what many call a practice contraction. It's common in late pregnancy, and although it can be painful and alarming, it's not dangerous for either of them. We've monitored her closely and she's stable." I exhaled, the tension in my shoulders loosening just slightly. "And she'll be okay?" "Absolutely," the doctor reassured me. "She just needs to rest for a short while. The baby is perfectly fine." I sank into the chair nearby, my hands still gripping the armrests like I'd never let go. Relief washed through me, but it was tempered with lingering guilt and frustration, the knowledge that even a normal contraction had nearly made me lose control behind the wheel. I didn't move, just watched the doors to her room, willing her to wake up and tell me she was fine herself. I didn't move from the chair in the VIP room. Ava lay on the bed, pale and resting, her breathing even and soft, the rise and fall of her belly reassuring. I could finally exhale, my hands unclenching from the leather armrests. Thank God it had nothing to do with her spending the day outside. Otherwise, I'd have blamed myself completely. The quiet was heavy but needed, a fragile bubble I didn't want to burst. Then, just as I was about to let my shoulders finally loosen, my phone vibrated sharply in my pocket. I fished it out and saw Tim's name flashing on the screen. I sighed, running a hand over my face. "Excuse me," I muttered, quietly closing the door behind me as I stepped into the hallway to take the call. "Colton," Tim's voice came through immediately, tense. "We've got a situation." I arched an eyebrow. "Go on." He hesitated, as if the words themselves were difficult to say. "We just received a special guest at the hotel. She's requesting that only you serve her personally." I stopped mid-step, my patience already thinning. "You're joking, this is a joke, right?" My tone was sharp, irritation cutting through the calm I'd been trying to force on myself. Tim's voice was dead serious. "I hope it's a joke, but she's that woman, Vivienne Laurent." I froze, hearing it before I even recognized it. The name. A name I'd heard countless times in whispers, in reports, in passing mentions from colleagues, a woman who was anything but easy to handle, someone who demanded attention and had the power to make headlines simply by walking through a lobby. I'd never met her, never seen her face, but I knew enough to know the chaos she could unleash. I let out a frustrated low groan, rubbing the bridge of my nose. Figures. Of course it's her, damn it. "Colton," Tim's voice warned, but I cut him off with a sharp inhale. "I'll be there in a few. Handle everything until I arrive," I said, my tone clipped. I ended the call before he could protest. The second I hung up, I dialed Agnes. She answered on the first ring, her voice calm and steady. "Mr. Colton," she said, already expecting something urgent. "Agnes, come to the hospital I just sent you and stay with Ava," I instructed. "Just make sure she's comfortable and doesn't move too much. I'll be back shortly. Don't leave her alone for a second." "Of course, Mr. Colton," she replied immediately, no questions asked. I hung up and gave one last glance toward the VIP room. Ava's chest rose and fell in that steady rhythm, oblivious to the storm outside her quiet haven. I hated leaving her. Hated that the world insisted on demanding my attention while she was supposed to be resting. But duty called. I turned on my heel, already calculating the next steps in my mind, the balance between protecting Ava and dealing with a woman whose mere presence could turn my hotel upside down. Because the last thing I could afford was a headline tomorrow morning screaming about a Billionaires hotel fiasco. The drive to the hotel was short, but my mind didn't rest for a second. Ava's pale face, the way she'd winced in pain, the unconscious weight of her body as they wheeled her through the hospital doors, it all clung to me like smoke I couldn't shake. By the time I pulled up to the front entrance of my hotel and club pulsed with its usual nighttime rhythm. Spotlights cut through the night air, cars lined the drive, and a line of guests all desperate to get in curved down the block. But I barely saw any of it. Inside, the main floor was alive, music thrummed low, glasses clinked, laughter carried like smoke. My staff straightened as I entered, the effect of my presence immediate. Heads turned, whispers rose. Tim was already waiting near the elevator, his face taut with nerves. "She's in the Crystal Lounge," he said in a low tone, matching my stride as we moved. "Ordered a bottle of Chateau Margaux, sent it back, demanded another. She's restless, Colton. I don't like restless with her." I shot him a warning look. "Calm yourself. She's a guest, not a bomb." He swallowed hard. "Sometimes I think she's worse." The elevator doors slid open and I stepped inside, buttoning my jacket as the floors ticked upward. By the time they opened again, I'd buried the mess of thoughts about Ava, buried the frustration of being pulled in two directions. I couldn't afford weakness here, not in front of Vivienne Laurent. The Crystal Lounge was private, draped in gold light and velvet shadows. My best servers flitted around the edges, moving nervously under the weight of her presence. And there she was. She was exactly what I expected and nothing like it at all. Tall, striking, wrapped in a gown that clung like liquid silk. Dark hair fell in perfect waves down her back, her red lips curved in the faintest smile, the kind that promised trouble. Her eyes found mine the moment I entered, sharp and gleaming like a predator spotting prey. "Well?" she purred, swirling her wine glass lazily as she rose. "So the infamous Colton Sinclair finally decides to join me." I didn't flinch, didn't let her see the annoyance flickering under my skin. "Vivian." My voice was cool, measured. "To what do I owe the honor?" She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the expensive perfume clinging to her skin. "Honor?" Her smile widened, wicked. "Darling, you make it sound like I'm here uninvited. I came because your reputation intrigued me. A man who builds empires from ash and keeps them under his iron fist." "Flattery," I said dryly, "is the oldest currency in this club. If that's all you came for, then I suggest we don't waste each other's time." Her laughter rang out, rich and amused, drawing the eyes of the staff. She leaned in, her lips a whisper from my ear. "Oh, Colton, I didn't come for flattery. I came for you. I always get what I want." I met her gaze steadily, though my jaw tightened. She was dangerous not because of her beauty, not because of her wealth, but because she knew how to turn attention into a weapon. One wrong move, one headline tomorrow, and my empire could take a hit. But I couldn't stay long, not with Ava lying unconscious in that hospital bed. "You'll have my attention," I said evenly, "for one drink. After that I have business that can't wait." Her brow arched, curiosity sparking. "Business? Or someone?" I didn't answer. Her smile deepened. She knew she'd found a crack, and Vivienne Laurent was the kind of woman who thrived on cracks. Her glass caught the low light as she swirled the deep red wine, eyes never leaving mine. The corner of her mouth curved in that same taunting smile, as though every second of silence was a game she was winning. Then with deliberate softness she said, "By the way, I heard what happened to your sister." The words hit me like a blade between the ribs. My jaw clenched before I could stop it, but I kept my gaze cold, unreadable. Vivian tilted her head, studying me as if my reaction were the entertainment she'd ordered. "Such a tragedy," she continued smoothly, her tone dripping with feigned sympathy. "I'm terribly sorry, Colton, truly." For a moment it almost sounded sincere, almost. But then her lips curved sharper, her next words sliding out like poisoned honey. "Still, some say her fate was inevitable, don't you?" Her words lodged in my chest like a splinter I couldn't dig out. Inevitable. I didn't flinch, though every muscle in my body begged me to react. Instead, I leaned back in the leather booth, forcing a calmness I didn't feel, my hand curling loosely around the edge of the table. My glass remained untouched. "Careful, Vivian," I said evenly, voice low, the kind that made men at the poker tables fall silent. "You're stepping somewhere you don't belong." She smirked, clearly enjoying herself. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Colton. I'm only making conversation." Her manicured finger trailed the rim of her glass, slow, deliberate. "Your sister. She was beautiful, spirited, but fragile things always break, don't they?" Heat crawled up the back of my neck, but I swallowed it down. Losing control here, in my club, in front of her, would only feed her. "I don't recall asking for your opinion," I replied, each word precise, clipped, sharpened. Vivian leaned forward, her perfume drifting across the space between us, subtle yet suffocating. Her eyes glimmered with a challenge. "No, but you knew I would give it. That's why you came out here instead of sending one of your men. You don't want a drink served, Colton, you want a test." I held her gaze, my silence deliberate. Silence had power, and she hated not getting a reaction. She tilted her head, a mock pout curving her lips. "Don't glare at me like that. I said I was sorry, didn't I?" "Sorry isn't a weapon," I muttered. "Oh, but it is," she countered instantly, a spark of mischief in her tone. It slices deeper when it's false, and you know mine is. I finally reached for my drink, not to taste it, but to keep my hand from closing into a fist. I swirled the amber liquid once before setting it down again. "Vivian," I said, voice dark enough to still her smirk for half a breath. "Say my sister's name again and I'll have you escorted out so fast you won't even have time to finish your little performance." Her laughter rang out, low and throaty, curling around us like smoke. "There he is," she whispered, eyes alight with something that was equal parts admiration and provocation. "The Colton everyone fears. I was beginning to think grief had made you soft." My pulse thudded in my ears, but outwardly I remained stone, calculating, watching her. She sipped her wine, then set it down gently. "Relax. I came here for pleasure, not war. Besides," she tapped her finger against the table, nails clicking softly, "we both know your sister's story isn't finished. Not really." That last line hung in the air, heavier than everything else she'd said. My breath stilled, my chest tightened, and for the first time that evening I let my mask slip just enough for her to see the storm gathering in my eyes. Vivian leaned back, satisfied. She'd struck her mark. The burn in my chest had nothing to do with her words and everything to do with the whiskey I forced down in a single swallow. The glass slammed back onto the table with a dull thud. My jaw tightened. My patience stretched thin and still. I didn't break. Instead, I leaned forward, meeting her head on. My tone was measured, controlled, the kind that hid steel beneath velvet. "What's your deal with me, Vivian? What's the reason you came strutting into my club tonight? There are 100 hotels in New York that would bend over backward for you." Her lips curved slowly, as though she'd been waiting for me to finally ask. She set her glass aside with deliberate care, the crystal catching the light before it kissed the polished wood. Then she mirrored my lean close enough for her perfume to cling to the air between us. "You want the truth?" she murmured, her smile sharpened at the edges. "Be my fake husband, Colton, and I'll help you find the one responsible for your sister's death." The words landed like a gunshot. For a second, the thrum of music from the main floor seemed to vanish, drowned beneath the pounding of my pulse. My knuckles pressed against the table, white with restraint. I let the silence stretch, heavy and cutting. "You're out of your mind," I finally said, voice low but dangerous. "I'm not interested." Vivian arched one perfectly shaped brow, her expression unreadable, though amusement flickered in her gaze. She leaned back lazily, swirling the wine in her glass as though I hadn't just shut her down. "You'd better reconsider," she said softly, almost sweetly, though her tone was laced with threat. "Men like you don't get the luxury of saying no to me." Her calm confidence scraped against my nerves, but I didn't move, didn't blink. I let her see the storm raging just beneath my skin. "I've survived worse than you," I told her evenly, but inside my chest the words twisted, because she wasn't bluffing. No one dropped promises like that without something to back it up. Vivian smirked, sipping her wine, utterly unbothered. "Maybe so, but you've never survived me." Vivian rose with unhurried grace, the hem of her dress sliding like water as she leaned down. Her lips brushed against my cheek, a mockery of affection that burned more than it soothed. "I'll be waiting for your answer," she whispered, her breath warm against my skin. And then she was gone, sweeping away with her wall of black-suited security, every pair of eyes in the room following her exit. I stayed seated a beat longer, jaw locked, fighting the urge to wipe the spot she kissed as though it were poison. Then I shoved back my chair and headed straight for my office. The neat stacks of contracts and balance sheets greeted me, but the numbers blurred on the page. No matter how many times I blinked, no matter how many pages I turned, nothing stuck. My mind was miles away, tangled in Vivienne Laurent's voice, her offer, her threat. Eventually, I tossed the pen aside, the metallic click echoing in the room like a gunshot. Frustration coiled tight in my chest. I wasn't getting anything done. Not tonight. So I climbed the stairs, unlocking the heavy door to my private suite, the one with mirrored glass overlooking the entirety of the club. From here, I could see everything without being seen. The dance floor throbbed with life below, colored lights slicing through smoke, laughter and bass rising in waves. For a while, I simply stood there watching. My kingdom, my sanctuary, everything looked perfect, too perfect. And then chaos walked in. A man strode through the entrance, cutting across the floor like he owned it. His shoulders were broad, his stride deliberate, and his expression carried that dangerous edge I'd learned never to underestimate. Security spotted him instantly, already murmuring into their earpieces, but the man didn't falter. He moved like he knew where he was going. I narrowed my eyes, every instinct sharpening. He wasn't dressed like the usual drunk rich boy looking for trouble. No, this one had purpose written all over him. The crowd parted subtly in his wake, curiosity sparking in their eyes as whispers spread. Whoever he wasn't here for a drink or a good time. My hand curled into a fist against the glass. Tonight had already been long, and something told me it was about to get worse. I barked into my cuff earpiece the moment I saw the man's shoulders cut through the crowd. Get him out, now. Security moved like trained soldiers. 2 of them converged on the intruder and guided him toward the exit. He didn't struggle at first. He walked with a strange composure, as if being led out was part of the plan. I relaxed a fraction, convinced the problem was contained. Then, barely audible over the bass, the stranger's voice slipped free and rose into something monstrous. "There's a bomb in this club." The phrase detonated faster than any alarm. Glasses clattered to tables. Conversations died mid-sentence and were replaced by an animal sound. People screaming, orders of magnitude higher than the music. Chairs scraped against the floor as bodies lunged for the exits. A woman tripped on a heel and went down. Someone else vaulted over her and kept running, trampling hands that reached up in panic. Men shoved past shoulder to shoulder, knocking couples apart. The room collapsed into chaos like a house of cards under a sudden gust. My stomach dropped. For a beat, the world slowed. The strobing light, the frightened faces, the terrified shouting, the trained response I kept in boardrooms, control, command, containment, felt useless in the swell of human fear. I saw a child's stroller topple. A man clutch his chest as he stamped on someone's shoulder by accident, and the sound of bodies colliding made something in my throat tighten. I scratched the bridge of my nose hard, and my other hand curled into a fist until my nails bit the palm. Rage burned hot and ugly beneath the shock. Rage at the coward who'd shouted that word as a weapon. Rage at the vulnerability of every person in this room. Rage at systems and people who might have failed us. I wanted to stand on the bar and tell everyone to stop, but telling them wouldn't fix the stampede, wouldn't soothe the terror. My radio was a thin thread of calm in the pandemonium. "Lockdown protocol," I ordered, my voice steady though my pulse spiked. "Evacuate the perimeter, get medics in now, clear the floor, use the secondary exits, no one goes back in for any reason." Staff scrambled to obey, attempts at authority cutting through the noise in stuttering bursts. Still, with throngs pushing toward the doors, it felt impossible to convince some patrons that our security was layered. Magnetometers, cameras, perimeter sweeps. That the facility wasn't some paper fort easily breached. Nobody wanted logic in that moment. They wanted certainty, and certainty had walked out with the man they were dragging. I watched as the intruder was shoved into the night, his back hitting the pavement like the last click of a trigger. Sirens began to wail in the distance, police, then ambulance, sinking into the cacophony. The club emptied like someone had pulled a plug. Shards of music and laughter cut off mid-note, leaving a hollow echo where life had been. Staff herded the last dazed patrons toward the exits. A few lingered, eyes wide, still clutching phones as if proof of survival. I stood alone on the polished floor, the aftertaste of adrenaline still sharp in my mouth, watching the room shrink to emptiness. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. My thumb hovered, an instinctive caution, but I answered anyway. A cool, amused voice filled my ear. "That was just to show you what I can do, Colton." It was Vivian. A tumble of cold ran down my spine. "What do you want?" I asked, even though I already knew part of the answer. She chuckled softly. "An answer. Before dawn. Because you wouldn't like what I do if you wait." The line clicked off before I could force anything else out of her. I stared at the screen, the single word Vivian glowing like a dare. Then I stepped out into the night. Outside, the scene was bedlam. Flashing lights painted the street in falsified reds and blues. Police had already cordoned off the entrance. Guests poured out of the hotel. Pajamas, robes, some clutching valuables, others hugging whoever they could find. Staff attempted to calm people, but fear was a contagious thing. It spread faster than any instruction. Officers had set up a temporary command near the curb. I moved to them immediately, the collar of my coat damp with sweat. "Mr. Sinclair." The lead officer, a square-jawed man with tired eyes, nodded curtly. "We've secured the perimeter. We'll sweep the building, check the car he left in. There's no bomb inside my club." I cut in, voice even though my pulse still thudded. The man was a plant. He was brought by allies of someone trying to make a scene. I kept my tone flat, careful. Panic fed itself. I would not pour fuel on it. "How can you be so sure?" the officer asked, skeptical, clipboard in hand. "Because the property is wired," I said. "Magnetometers at every entry, full CCTV with tamper alerts. A sweep protocol every hour. Anyone who tried to bring something hazardous in would have tripped multiple systems before crossing the threshold." I met his eyes. We detected nothing. No X-ray hits, no anomalous signals. This was staged to create fear, not to plant anything. He didn't look entirely convinced. "Sir, I'm sorry, but we're required to keep the building closed until a full sweep is completed and the bomb squad signs off. Local safety laws don't leave room for interpretation." My breath left me in a hard, controlled exhale. "Understood." I forced my shoulders to relax. "Do what you must." I pulled out my phone and barked a command to Tim. "Reserve emergency rooms at the nearest partner hotels. We need every displaced guest accommodated tonight. Shuttle service now." "On it," Tim replied. The efficiency in his voice steadied something in me. "I'll have a list and a bus schedule in 5. I turned to the crowd, to the frightened faces and the exhausted staff. "Ladies and gentlemen," I called, stepping onto the low lip of the entrance, forcing a tone that was calm and authoritative. "I apologize for the disruption. We will arrange accommodations for each of you tonight. Please stay with the staff at the curb. We have transport coming. I can't tell you how deeply sorry I am." A ripple of murmurs rolled through the group, some skeptical, some grateful. I met as many eyes as I could, offering the kind of placating presence that might never reach the bone of what had happened, but could at least steady the immediate fray. Security teams and paramedics started coordinating. Staff hustled people efficiently to the waiting shuttles Tim had already arranged. Guests complained, some shouted, but the process moved. I stayed at the edge until the last person boarded, the final shuttles pulling away in a slow, disconcerting caravan. Only then did I allow myself to lean against the cold facade of the building and let the night catch up. Vivienne's message replayed in my head. Before dawn, the threat was small and simple and woven with enough menace to unnerve me. I was good at warfare that lived on balance sheets and boardroom tables. I hadn't signed up for emotional blackmailers who could orchestrate chaos faster than a PR team could spin a story. But the rules had changed. I squared my shoulders, the decision solidifying like ice in my gut. Tonight, though, there were logistical fires to put out. I dialed Agnes and confirmed she was still with Ava. I let Tim know transport was in motion and instructed him to brief the hotels that would host our guests. Rooms, dinner, and full reimbursement. Just as I slipped the phone back into my pocket, it lit up again. A private number. I already knew who it was. I answered, jaw tight, ready to unleash hell. But before I could get a word out, Vivienne's voice poured through, smooth and lethal. "I just remembered something," she said almost playfully. "I didn't tell you that I also know all about your surrogate." The line went dead silent after that, leaving the words to detonate in my chest.
Ava's point of view.
The first thing I registered was the blinding white light above me, then the antiseptic scent that instantly tightened my chest. I gasped, sitting up too quickly, and my hands flew straight to my stomach. "Please." No, my breath stilled when I felt the faint, steady kick beneath my palm. A tear slipped free as I let out a shaky sigh of relief. The baby was fine, thank God. "You're awake." The voice startled me. I turned, blinking, and saw Agnes sitting in the chair beside the bed, her kind eyes heavy with sleep, but watching me with quiet worry. What happened?" My throat felt dry, the words cracking. "You were brought here," Agnes said gently. "Mr. Colton had to step out, but he asked me to stay with you until he returns." I nodded slowly, trying to piece everything together. My heart still raced, though, and I whispered, "Did the doctor say anything? About why I suddenly had that pain?" Agnes shook her head. "I'm not sure, dear. The doctor must have spoken directly with Mr. Colton." The answer made my stomach twist, unease prickling through me. I sank back against the pillows, biting down on my lower lip. This was my fault, all of it. I shouldn't have agreed to Colton's offer to leave the house tonight. I knew better. I was sure as hell that the pain was punishment for stuffing myself with junk food, ignoring all the warnings I'd read about what I should and shouldn't eat just anything while pregnant. My chest tightened as guilt pressed heavier with every breath. If anything happened to this baby, I would never forgive myself. The silence in the room pressed against me, heavy and suffocating. I curled my hand protectively around my stomach, as if my grip alone could shield the life inside me. My heart still thudded painfully in my chest, replaying the sharp, stabbing ache I'd felt earlier. Why had I gone out? Why had I even thought it was a good idea to accept Colton's offer? He was just trying to be kind, but I should have said no. I should have stayed put, kept things simple, kept myself safe. My mind wouldn't stop circling back to the greasy fries, the sugary soda, the chocolate bar I'd practically inhaled. Every article I'd read, every pamphlet I'd been handed at the clinic, had screamed warnings in bold letters about junk food and pregnancy, and still, I'd ignored it. The guilt dug in sharper than any pain. I imagined tiny fingers, tiny toes, a heartbeat that wasn't mine but still inside me, my chest constricted. What if my carelessness risked all of that? What if one moment of weakness had already damaged something precious I couldn't see? A lump rose in my throat. I clenched the blanket between my fists, fighting the urge to cry, but the tears still welled up anyway. I tried to blink them back, but they spilled freely, hot and unrelenting. "You're stronger than this," I whispered to myself, though my voice cracked. "You can't fall apart now." But even as I said it, doubt smothered me. I wasn't strong. I was reckless. I was selfish. This baby hadn't asked to be here, hadn't asked to be a part of some arrangement. Yet here I was, already failing at the one job I had, keeping it safe. I turned my head to the side, staring at the white wall, its blankness mirroring the emptiness hollowing me out inside. 1,000 questions churned in my mind, all unanswered. What had the doctor told Colton? Was it serious? Something dangerous? Something permanent? The thought stung worse than the pain had. I drew my knees up slightly, curling into myself, my palm still resting over the gentle curve of my belly. My lips trembled as I whispered so softly only the baby could hear. I'm so sorry. I'll do better, I promise. A faint kick answered, and for a fleeting second it steadied me, like the baby was telling me not to give up. The quiet creak of the door made my chest seize. My head jerked up, and the sight of Colton standing there nearly made my heart jolt clean out of my ribcage. He looked different. His broad shoulders sagged like they carried the weight of 1,000 things, his jaw tense, his eyes red as though they'd been stripped of every ounce of rest. My pulse spiked. He was going to scold me. I could feel it. The anger, the disappointment, the truth I dreaded, that I hadn't been careful, that I'd almost put his sister's baby in danger. Instead, his voice came low, rough, like gravel dragged across stone. Agnes, help her out. She's discharged. I'm taking her back home. Agnes hurried to my side without protest, gently adjusting the IV from my arm and guiding me to sit up. My legs trembled beneath me, but I forced myself to stand, my heart hammering when my eyes flicked back to him. He didn't say a word, didn't look at me, just turned, exhausted, his presence filling the space like a storm cloud. And in that moment, staring at the man I'd once believed to be untouchable, I realized his silence was worse than his anger. Was it because of me? The ride back was torture. Not a glance, not a word, not even the faintest trace of warmth from him. The road stretched endlessly in the reflection of the windshield, and every second dragged my guilt deeper into my chest. By the time we arrived at the mansion, I felt like my lungs could barely hold air. He killed the engine, got out, and held the door for me, still wordless. Inside, the house loomed too quiet, too hollow. Colton finally broke the silence, his deep voice commanding, "Thank you, Agnes. Turn in. It's late." Agnes nodded, gave me a fleeting smile of reassurance, and disappeared down the hall, leaving the two of us standing there. Then he turned to me. His eyes caught mine, and the force of that stare was enough to stop me dead. It was like being struck by lightning, intense, consuming, terrifying. "We need to talk," he said. Before I could gather words, before I could breathe, he was already moving, past my room, past his study, straight to another door, the one I'd never dared to imagine. His room. He opened it and stepped inside, leaving me hesitating, rooted to the floor. My hand trembled as I finally reached for the knob and entered. The soft click of the door closing behind me seemed to seal me into another world. "I'm sorry," I blurted, my voice trembling. "About what happened. I shouldn't have—" I never finished. In a single, swift motion, Colton closed the distance between us. His hand caught mine, tugging me forward until I collided with the hard wall of his chest. Then his mouth was on mine. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was searing, a storm crashing into me, burning me alive from the inside. I gasped, startled, my body locking for a moment before betraying me entirely. I melted against him, shameless, reckless. Every nerve in me flared, hungry for more. Hospital gown or not, exhaustion or not, I couldn't pull away. My body didn't know how to. His hands found me, held me, and the rest unravelled. Clothes, restraint, reason. He wasn't rough, but there was urgency in the way he took me, like he needed me in that very moment to anchor himself. And I let him, drowning in the heat, in the want I had fought for so long. After, as my breathing still shook, he didn't move. He stayed inside me, his body heavy and real against mine. And then his voice came, deep and husky, brushing fire across my skin. "Marry me." My breath caught. I froze, certain I'd misheard. But he repeated it, his words harder this time, certain. "Marry me, Ava. Tomorrow." Shock bolted through me. I blinked, dazed, sniffing at his skin without thinking, searching for alcohol, for something to explain this. I couldn't smell a drop. "I'm not drunk," he said, reading me too easily. His gaze burned into mine. "I said what I said. Marry me tomorrow." "Why?" My voice cracked. My eyes flicked downward, motioning to the space between us, to the fragile truth. "Is it because of this?" He pulled out then, rolling onto his side, his breathing rough. "I'll explain," he said, his tone low, steady. "But this too is the reason." His eyes locked on mine. "Do you agree?" I swallowed hard, my chest aching. "If I agree, then what will I be to you? I'm carrying your sister's child." He cut me off, firm, decisive, leaving no room for doubt. "You'll be my wife, and it will be our child." His eyes locked on me, unblinking, unrelenting, as if he were daring me to say no. My breath caught in my chest, tangled between reason and the pounding of my own heartbeat. It was confusion. Or was it lust? Could I truly tell the difference anymore? The memory of his kiss still burned on my lips, the weight of his body still pressed into my skin. I wanted him. God help me, I wanted him in a way that frightened me. Maybe I was mistaking this heat for something more, but in that moment, I couldn't bring myself to fight it. "Yes," I whispered, my voice trembling. Something sharp flashed in his eyes, satisfaction, triumph, maybe even relief. "Great," he said evenly, though the word carried a weight I couldn't decipher. "I'll get the driver and Agnes. They'll bring you to the venue tomorrow. The wedding will take place then." All I could do was nod. The world blurred after that, and when I opened my eyes again, morning light spilled across my face, too bright, too sharp, dragging me out of uneasy dreams. I sat up slowly, blinking, my gaze falling instinctively to the other side of the bed. Empty. He was gone. And then the memories hit me like a storm. My body stiffened, heat creeping into my cheeks. I'd slept with him again, last night, right after coming home from the hospital. Who in the world does that? Shame prickled at me, but strangely there was no discomfort, no pain, only the lingering traces of his touch. Cursing under my breath, I dragged my gaze around his room for the first time. It was nothing like mine. This was a sanctuary of steel and midnight, power etched into every corner. The walls carried striking geometric carvings, bold and commanding, with light slipping through to highlight their shadows. His bed was massive, the dark headboard cushioned like a throne, the sheets still tangled from our night. A deep navy rug sprawled beneath, trimmed with glowing lines that made the whole room seem suspended, otherworldly. A chair in the corner, modern and sleek, sat by tall glass windows draped with sheer white curtains. Everything screamed dominance, control, a place where secrets could be buried. I slipped my hospital gown back on, the absurdity of it hitting me as I quietly left his room and padded down the hall. Once in my room, I exhaled. Safe, at least for the moment. Inside, my nurse was already waiting, her expression calm but expectant. "Good morning," I greeted faintly, brushing past her into the bathroom. The hot shower was quick, just enough to rinse away the night clinging to me. I changed into a soft, comfortable dress before stepping back out. As always, the nurse checked me over with her efficient hands, murmured a reminder to take breakfast before my vitamins and medication, and slipped out. The silence barely lasted a moment before my phone rang. The sight of Molly's name lit up my screen and I smiled, excitement bubbling in my chest. I was ready to tell her. I was going to marry Colton. But her voice rushed out first, fast and sharp. "Did you know this too?" I frowned, my brows furrowing. "What are you talking about?" There was a beat of stunned silence before Molly's words cut through like a blade. "You mean you didn't know? Girl, it's all over the news. Colton Sinclair is engaged to Vivienne Laurent." My breath faltered, heart stopping mid-beat. What? I whispered, my voice breaking. Molly's gasp only confirmed it. You really didn't know? I hung up before she could say more, my fingers trembling as I scrambled through my phone. And there it was, the headline screaming back at me. Billionaire Colton Sinclair's secret engagement to the faceless famous Vivienne Laurent finally revealed. My phone slipped from my hand onto the bed with a dull thud, but the headline burned into my mind like it was carved there. Engaged. Colton Sinclair was engaged. My chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths as I pushed to my feet, pacing across the room. It felt like the walls were pressing in on me, like the floor couldn't steady itself beneath me. Just last night, he'd pulled me in his arms, kissed me like he needed me more than air, and asked me to marry him. Me. Now the entire world was screaming about Vivienne Laurent. I shook my head, refusing to believe it, but the more I thought about it, the harder it was to breathe. Why would he do that? Why would he ask me that question, say those words when he was tied to someone else? Unless I was nothing more than an outlet. I stopped pacing, my knees threatening to buckle, and dropped heavily onto the edge of the bed. My hands trembled as I picked the phone back up, forcing myself to stare at the article again. This time, my eyes dragged over Vivienne's photo, taking in every perfect curve of her face. Flawless skin, cold, elegant beauty, the kind of woman who belonged to men like Colton Sinclair. Not me. Of course, I thought bitterly. That was his league, women like her. I was just the convenient distraction, the surrogate carrying his dead sister's child, and apparently the plaything he turned to when the weight of his empire grew too heavy. But then, why ask me to marry him? Why look me in the eye and say it like he meant it? I dropped the phone onto the comforter with a sigh that felt more like defeat than anything else. My heart ached with every beat, each one whispering the same truth. I was a fool. The door creaked open, and Margaret stepped in, her calm presence grounding me against the storm inside. "Miss Ava," she said softly, "it's almost time for your medication. Would you come out, please?" I swallowed hard, nodding quickly before she could see the tears threatening to spill. "Yes, I'll come." I smoothed down my dress, shoved the chaos of my thoughts behind a mask, and followed her out of the bedroom. The scent of warm bread and coffee filled the dining room, though my stomach twisted too tight to feel hungry. Still, I lowered myself into a chair and reached for the glass of water in front of me, hoping it might wash down the lump in my throat. Margaret placed a small plate before me, as well as the familiar white pill bottle. "Eat first," she reminded me gently. I nodded, picking at the toast without tasting it, my mind miles away, still trapped in the storm of last night and this morning. Unable to focus, I excused myself and headed up for my phone, and when I opened it, I found Colton's missed calls. My heart raced. Should I call him back and hear what he has to say? What exactly? I headed back downstairs to continue with my breakfast and decided nothing happened. I chewed without tasting, the toast turning to dust on my tongue. Margaret's warm gaze lingered on me, but she didn't press further. She was too kind to pry, yet I could feel her curiosity, her concern. When she stepped away to fetch more juice, I slipped the phone closer again. My thumb hovered over Colton's contact, the urge to call him clawing at me, to demand answers. But what would I even say? Why did you lie to me? Why did you hold me like I was yours and then let the world see her as your fiancé? The bile in my stomach rose, and I shoved the phone face down on the table. I couldn't. Not yet. Margaret returned with the pot, filling my cup. "You're pale, child," she said softly. "Eat more. You need strength." I nodded mutely, forcing another bite past the tightness in my throat, but no food could soothe the storm ripping through me. The sound of footsteps in the hall snapped my head up. I didn't need to look to know who it was. My body knew before my mind could catch up. Colton's presence filled the doorway like a shadow, broad shoulders, unreadable eyes. Margaret glanced between us, then excused herself quietly, leaving me alone with the man who had broken me in ways I didn't even know were possible. Why didn't you answer my calls?" His voice was low, smooth, but I caught the flicker of frustration beneath it. I laughed bitterly, the sound too sharp. "Maybe because I was too busy reading about your engagement?" His jaw tightened, the smallest twitch at the corner of his mouth. But he didn't flinch, didn't rush to deny it. That silence was worse than any confirmation. "You kissed me last night, Colton. You asked me to marry you." My voice cracked, tears burning the back of my eyes, only to find out you were engaged. "Do you have any idea what that does to me?" He stepped forward, slow and deliberate, like a predator who knew I was already cornered. "Vivienne Laurent means nothing." My breath caught. "Nothing. She's plastered all over the news with a ring on her finger." "Come with me," he said, his tone brooking no argument. I tried to pull back, but the heat of his grip burned into my skin, and somehow my body betrayed me, letting him guide me. He led me upstairs, each step echoing with the thundering beat of my heart. My breaths came shallow, tangled with questions that wouldn't leave my throat. At the end of the hall, he opened the heavy door to his study, ushering me inside, his rich scent hitting me hard. He shut the door softly behind us, but the sound still reverberated in my chest like a verdict. When he turned to me, his eyes were darker than I'd ever seen them, storm clouds on the verge of breaking. "Ava," he began, his voice low but steady, "listen to me. Whatever you saw this morning, whatever the world is saying, it isn't the truth." I blinked at him, searching his face for a crack, something that would betray a lie. My hands curled into fists. "Then explain it to me. Why her? Why are you asking me to marry you, only for me to wake up to headlines screaming you belong to someone else? Why put me through this?" My voice cracked, and I hated how desperate it sounded. He stepped closer, so close I could feel the heat rolling off him. His hand brushed against mine again, gentler this time, like he was asking for permission. "I don't know how it happened," he said, jaw tight. "I was as stunned as you to see that headline. That's why I left this morning. I went straight to confront Vivienne. She has her own agenda, Ava. The engagement. It's a fabrication. I never proposed to her." The floor swayed beneath me. "You expect me to believe that? That someone can just invent an engagement and the entire media runs with it?" "I don't just expect you to believe me." His voice sharpened, then softened again as he cupped the back of my hand in his. "I need you to, because I meant every word I said to you last night. I asked you to marry me because I want you, Ava, not Vivienne, not anyone else." My throat constricted. My heart wanted so badly to trust him, to cling to the raw sincerity in his eyes, but my mind screamed at me not to fall so easily again. I drew a long, shaky breath. My heart was still hammering, but I forced the words out. "All right, I'll believe you. But what are you going to do, Colton? The whole world knows you're engaged now. If we get married, won't it affect your career? People will think you're a two-timer dick." To my surprise, he let out a low laugh, a rough sound that seemed to scrape the tension from the air. "Feels good to hear you care about me, even when you insult me." His eyes warmed as he tilted his head, studying me. "Don't worry about my image. Our wedding will be private. I'll deal with Vivienne myself." I sank onto the leather chair behind me, my fingers knotting together. "A private wedding?" My voice wavered. "Colton, that was never my dream. I'd always pictured a grand one, where my guests are free, comfortable, and no one has to worry about hiding or avoiding cameras, where the world can see the happiness on our faces without shame." I swallowed. "So maybe, let's take this slow. It'll give us time to know each other better too." For a long second, he just looked at me, hands tucked deep in pockets, his gaze unreadable, like he was weighing something only he knew. His lips parted, and I thought he might argue. Then his phone buzzed. He lifted it, pressed it to his ear. And in an instant, his expression darkened. His back stiffened, jaw tightening as though invisible shackles had just snapped around him. When he pulled the phone away to glance at something on the screen, I caught the faint flash of anger in his eyes before he shoved it back against his ear. Then, just as quickly, he yanked it away, ending the call. "Colton?" I was already on my feet, a knot forming in my stomach. "What is it? What's wrong?" He turned to me, the mask sliding into place so fast it almost made me dizzy. "It's about work," he said smoothly, slipping the phone into his pocket with finality. "I have to head out. I'll be back early." His gaze softened, lingering on me. "Mind having a dinner date with me?" The knot in my chest loosened just a little. I couldn't help the small smile tugging at my lips. "That would be great." He nodded once, firm, then turned for the door. I trailed behind him, his stride purposeful, mine slower as my thoughts tangled. We descended the stairs together, but while he disappeared toward the front entrance, I made my way to the kitchen, where Margaret was waiting with my medication. Even as I swallowed the pills with lukewarm water, my mind kept circling back to the way Colton's expression had changed, how sharp and cold it had been before he smoothed it over. Whatever that call had been about, he wasn't telling me the whole truth. The day passed in a blur, just like that, and the night stretched endlessly. I'd changed into a simple yet elegant dress, one Colton had sent Agnes to give me. My hair was brushed, a soft gloss on my lips, but the hours kept slipping through my fingers. 7 o'clock passed, then 8. By 9, my heart was beating faster, not from excitement, but from dread. I paced the foyer, heels clicking softly against the marble, my eyes darting to the wide glass doors every time headlights flickered down the long driveway. Each time, it was nothing. No car. No Colton. By the time the grandfather clock chimed 10, my chest ached from holding my breath so much. I sank onto the sofa in the main living room, staring at the door like my willpower could drag him through it. My phone sat useless in my palm, the screen black, no missed calls, no texts. Not even a word. My eyelids grew heavy, the weight of disappointment pulling me under. I must have dozed off because the next thing I felt was a gentle shake. "Miss Ava." Margaret's soft voice coaxed me awake. I blinked up at her, disoriented. The lamplight glowed warmly above her head like a halo. I straightened quickly, my voice rough from sleep. "Is he back?" Margaret's gaze was kind, but her shake of the head crushed the fragile hope I'd been clinging to. Not yet. I swallowed hard, fumbling for my phone. The lock screen lit up. 10:47 p.m. Still no messages. Still nothing. My spine stiffened as I sat upright, clutching the device like it might finally buzz. "It's late. Too late," I whispered. The worry I'd tried to bury all evening now surged in my veins. Is he still caught up with his work? I rose from the sofa, brushing invisible creases from my dress. "I'll just go change," I murmured, trying to sound casual, though inside I was unraveling. My feet carried me toward the staircase, each step heavy with the weight of waiting, of disappointment, of endless what-ifs. And then the sound. Tires crunching softly against the gravel outside. The unmistakable hum of an engine pulling up the drive. My heart leapt to my throat. Colton. Despite the lateness, despite the hours of silence, a smile broke free on my lips. He came. He still came. The dinner might have been ruined, but at least he was here. I turned, drifting back toward the entrance as hope lifted my chest. The foyer lights gleamed across the polished marble, and I smoothed my hair, pulse quickening. But the moment the door swung open, everything inside me turned to ice. Colton stood there, broad shoulders, tailored suit, that magnetic presence that drew the air from the room. But he wasn't alone. Beside him, hand in hand, walked a woman in a gown so breathtaking it seemed made of starlight. The dress shimmered with delicate beadwork, the bodice hugging every perfect curve, sheer fabric flowing like spun silk around her long legs. A daring slit revealed skin that caught the light, and her heels clicked with effortless poise. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears, her beauty so refined it belonged to another world. Vivienne Laurent. And not just dressed to impress. She wore a wedding dress. My breath caught. The smile on my lips died instantly. They looked like a bride and groom returning from their vows, her elegance blazing like a cruel reminder of everything I wasn't. And worse, their hands were linked, fingers entwined as though they belonged only to each other. The world tilted, the air disappearing from my lungs. Colton's eyes lifted to mine across the grand foyer. And in that moment, I knew this was the beginning of misery in this house.
I've been strong for too long, smiling through the cracks in me. Told the world I'm fine, but no one ever stays to see. I'm drowning in quiet, screaming when no one can hear. But when I reach for you, will you be there, my dear? Carried love like a burden, giving more than I